SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar.
Reauthorized each time, being strengthened in 2000, 2005. And the last reauthorization was in 2013. And so what the VAWA Act does a number of things. Again, each year each reauthorization having been strengthened, but it provides funding for critical programs that are providing services throughout the nation and communities, including on our reservation. Title 8, which is the Safety for Indian Women title, addresses specific provisions for tribes. And so I know you said you wanted to start off, and let's talk about what VAWA is, but what's so exciting about the new authorization is that it expands tribes' ability to hold non-native offenders accountable for various crimes. And so the 2013 reauthorization restored criminal jurisdiction over non-natives that commit crimes of domestic violence, dating violence, and violation of protective orders. And so they have renewed that within this new reauthorization, but then also opened the door, expanded the jurisdiction, and restoring tribes' ability to hold non-natives who commit crimes related to child violence, sexual violence, sex trafficking, stalking, obstruction of justice, and assault of tribal justice personnel. So all of that is really significant, especially for us, now post-Supreme Court ruling. And so every tool and ability that we have to hold offenders accountable for crimes that they commit on our reservation is more critical now than ever.
Now that is let's say that's the essence. That's the hole in the law that has been plugged, and was the most critical part of protection for Native women. Now, I remember in ancient times when this question came to the courts, the Oliphant case back in Washington State, I believe it was a Salish reservation. Guy there had been harassing, molesting, attacking Native women, and thought they could do anything they wanted and get away with it because tribal police had no jurisdiction over them, them being non-natives. And he was, shooting his mouth off saying, I can do any dang thing I want, and you can't touch me.
Yeah.
And then the effort came along and changed that law and said, wait a minute, now we can, and we're going to.
Yes.
Now that is the real heart of the matter here now. As one who's been involved with this issue for a number of years, what does that mean to you now to have that kind of protection and safeguard in place?
Oh my gosh. It's so significant, especially again back to the world that we're living in now, post Supreme Court ruling. Unfortunately, we have seen cases that have come through where the tribe does not have jurisdiction to prosecute, and many of the cases covered within this new reauthorization. And so for the tribe, again, to have the ability, we have to have the ability to hold offenders accountable for crimes they commit on our reservation. And going back to Oliphant, I think most advocates and, tribes would argue, for an Oliphant fix where, we have, full criminal jurisdiction is restored for tribes. And so that's not the case yet, but however, again, going back to this reauthorization, our ability to prosecute non-natives for these additional crimes is again, it means so much, and again is more important now than ever. You know, our prosecutors, our light horsemen, our prosecutors, our advocates, our tribal court is working daily to help increase safety, public safety on the reservation, hold offenders accountable, and protect victims of crime and the public. And so, we need all the resources and tools available to enable us to do that.
Let me ask you, if you can recall or were aware of the situation before VAWA here in Mvskoke lands. Was it just an open door kind of thing? Do you remember? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, sure. So, prior to the ruling, going back to 2013, when there was the reauthorization and that expanded or restored jurisdiction of non-natives who commit the crimes of domestic dating, violence, and violation of protective orders, with our reservation at that time, with only, the checkerboard, recognition of checkerboard type jurisdiction, we did have non-natives that fell within those guidelines, and so that the nation was able to prosecute, but it wasn't very many, because mainly what we were talking about at that time were our casinos, pockets of individual trust land. And so, it was limited. But now, with the recognition of our reservation, this is Indian country. And so we have so many more cases that are coming through to the tribe. And so, as far as domestic violence, I will say too, unfortunately, child crimes, child sexual assault, child abuse, those types of crimes we're seeing, are very prevalent, unfortunately. So between child crimes and domestic violence is what I hear from law enforcement and our Office of Attorney General as kind of being some of the most prevalent crimes that unfortunately are coming across, the nation's desk for prosecution. So,
have those agencies supplied any statistics? Do we have any numbers of crimes committed or prosecuted to the end, to some sort of penalty phase?
Yeah, so, the thing, I think what all of our offices are continuing to work on is building and strengthening that capacity to meet these responsibilities, these increased responsibilities that we have. And so implementation of database systems, ways to help, expedite and enhance our data collection is ongoing. I do know that there are some documents on the Attorney General's Facebook page, but website that provides some of those statistics, numbers, I think, pre-ruling, and then some numbers post-ruling as well, to kind of just indicate the significant increases. So,
well, yeah, seeing how you're not familiar with specific numbers, but is it your feeling then that the law has become effective? Is it doing the job it was supposed to do?
Yes, absolutely. And I, like you, Gary, too, am also interested in those numbers, because while we're seeing it in our office, at Family Violence, our call volume, our referrals, our requests for services have gone up about 50% since the ruling. We had some data from Light Horse kind of early on that indicated, their domestic violence calls were up by about 90%. And so everybody is staying very busy, and it's so we're seeing it on a day-to-day basis. We know those significant increases have occurred, and then being able to see those numbers, I think, will just only help illustrate that, for us and for the, our citizens and the public too.
In the times before the law really was implemented and put to work. My feeling is that people said, well, why call the cops? They can't do anything. So first of all, first question there is, has that attitude been realized and changed? Do people now say, well, we do have this law that'll throw your tail in jail if you do this kind of thing? Do you hear that? Do you feel it? Does your staff run across that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can say is that, and I think it's really important to note when we have these discussions about the impact of the Supreme Court ruling, is that just because, the Supreme Court affirmed our reservation does not mean all of a sudden crime went up. It's very important that we make that point. What it means is, and why we have such high volume of cases now, is because our law enforcement now are more often the first responders to these, types, to crime. Our citizens, many feel more comfortable reaching out to Light Horse to report a victimization or to seek help and support from law enforcement. So we know that, has definitely increased, people's comfort level, I guess, reaching out for law enforcement when needed. So I think there's a variety of things there, and one of the biggest differences that we see is that prior to the ruling, Native people, on our reservation, again, pre-reservation ruling, were most often being victimized in state jurisdiction, or what was believed to be state jurisdiction. So we had so many of our citizens of other tribes, who were victims in cases that were going through state court. And so clearly that has changed, and so we have more victims coming through tribal court or going to federal court. And so, a lot of changes, I think great changes. The nation is working very hard amongst our departments, like I said, to strengthen our responses, and, lots of challenges, but there's also lots of great work and things that are happening.
Has this renewal given you extra powers, so to speak, or perhaps funding to take care of the load that you already have to do what you're doing already? How does that change affect what you do?
Sure. So, and that's another part of the VAWA reauthorization, is that it does renew the VAWA funded grant programs, and also provides increase in funding. And so now is, it's a good time for our program. We are blessed with a tremendous amount of financial resources, and so we're using that to increase our staff, increase services. We're really happy to be working with the executive branch and have the support of leadership on developing our first shelter for victims and survivors. So looking forward to moving forward with that process and being able to provide those services to our citizens and citizens of other tribes and people on our reservation. And so it is a good time as far as funding from the different grant programs. And then also there's, the tribe has been able to receive a variety of discretionary funding through the ARPA. Thankfully we have a lot of great financial resources right now that's helping us to increase our program.
So it sounds like your basic funding was increased, and that it allows other programs to sort of piggyback onto it and supply even more support. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. Again, at Family Violence, we've been very aggressive in our grant writing. And so I do know there's other programs within the tribe too, pursuing other grants and funding to help, meet these needs and help, us to be able to respond, our criminal justice system to respond in an effective way, again, to hold offenders accountable and ensure victim safety and public safety. So
Now, let's move to that arena for just a minute. A couple of questions come to mind is, what effect has it on Lighthorse, the police? And the second, has the court's caseload been able to tackle such a new stream of things? So first of all, has Lighthorse now acknowledged changes? Do they feel like they can be more effective, and has it shown? I mean, how has Lighthorse reacted from your point of view here?
yeah, well, and I can't, like you mentioned, from my point of view, I can't speak on behalf of Lighthorse. What I can say from my experience with them is that, man, we value those officers, those investigators, that staff. Our staff are working with them virtually on a daily basis, and I myself have been at the hospital for a sexual assault exam, to be there with a survivor, and had a light horseman respond that had 3 calls, waiting for a response. And so, I mean, from what I see in my experience, our light horsemen are working very, very hard. We have a very large reservation that requires, a lot of resources, to ensure public safety. And so they're working hard. They're collaborating to try to increase their responses. I think, like the rest of us, to build their capacity, strengthen, the skills of their officers and investigators. And so, I mean, we're so thankful for their hard work and the partnership and collaboration that we have with them, because I can't imagine trying to tackle these, responsibilities without that collaboration with
Is
them.
it your feeling then that these changes have made their job easier in regards to domestic violence?
I wouldn't say easier. What I'd say is that, our officers are responding to a significant amount of domestic violence, related calls. And so, what they do have are resources from our program, where officers are reaching out 24/7 when they go on scene, to speak to one of our advocates to get a victim linked up. I've heard from officers at Lighthorse say, how helpful advocates have been, and being able to kind of do a warm handoff, if you will, of a victim or survivor that they respond to an advocate from our program to help walk through those next steps and address safety issues and things like that, is really beneficial. And so us just having that, that teamwork in place is, it's best practice, and I'm just really thankful, to see it in action here on our reservation. But I don't know that anything about their jobs is easier right now, because they're very, very busy, and so we do everything we can to try to support their efforts, because they're working really hard.
Kind of a related question to that is that, I understand from my exposure to dealing with some of this, and as a reporter, and of course it's all over TV and news and things like that, domestic violence responses are some of the most dangerous situations a police officer can get into. Is that still pretty much the case in Mvskoke reservation?
I would say so, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because already we know the role of law enforcement is, potentially very dangerous. And so you're right. I think, and I apologize, I don't, have any recent data, but in all of our trainings, in this field, and with law enforcement too, they're, talk about the increased safety risks when we're responding to domestic violence calls. And so we're just this morning finishing up a draft of a document to submit to the court for review, to attach for protective orders, and that asks, about firearms. I mean, we want, our law enforcement, when they are going to serve those protective orders, to have, it's important for them to have as much information as possible. And if an individual, has firearms, that, they're going to serve a protective order, well, not only, if they're subject to a domestic violence protective order, are they not supposed to have firearms? We also know the presence of firearms, increases risk not only for victims, but law enforcement too. So, so those are, and I appreciate that you brought that up, because I don't think we talk about that enough. And so that is something that has definitely been on our radar, especially because they are responding to so many more of those calls. You had asked previously about the court, and just from the court, I know the number of emergency and protective orders that are being filed in tribal court has skyrocketed. I know I have not been over to the court recently, but I know, we have a new chief district judge, Judge Wiley. They've added on 2 additional judges that I'm aware of, and so the court is growing, and so, lots of, again, it's, everybody is working really hard, and lots of good things are happening.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we're getting a little short on time for this segment. I'm going to have you back, and we'll have to keep going.
Sure.
I want to talk about having to watch the show Cops too often, I think. Some guy pulling a gun or a knife or something silly like that.
Yes,
anyway,
thank you, Gary.
Sean, thank you so much. And as I said, we will have you back for a continued discussion on this very important subject, and maybe we'll have some numbers and drag in Light Horse at the same time.
I think they'd love that. I would too.
Okay, Mado, we thank you so much. We're going to take a short pause here, and we'll be back with a segment on classical ballet and how a Mvskoke woman was part of that world. Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio here on 106.3 The Brew. We're going to share a piece now with the experiences of Nancy Scott, also a ballet dancer back in the era when the 4 Indian ballerinas were just gracing the stages internationally and showing the world of dance to Native Americans and to the international stages. Anyway, let's stop talking and let's do some listening. And I asked her how tough that job was.
And don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't do something that you've set your mind to. She said I could do anything I wanted to do, be anyone I wanted to be, and go anywhere I wanted to go. There was no limitations, that I just had to make my mind up. So we went down to the thrift stores on First and Archer, and for $1.50 bought my first leotards, tights, and ballet shoes, and I started dancing. I called the person up and said, I want to take class with you, but I have no money. And he said, well, can you answer the phone, and can you write receipts? And I started dancing at 13. My first class was at 8, but I was also a gymnast, so we took classes as a gymnastics team. I switched from gymnastics to ballet at 13 and started training. He taught me for a year and said, I've taught you everything I can teach you. I'm going to send you to another teacher. So he sent me to a lady named Margot Crowdis in Tulsa, and she in turn sent me to the Tulsa Civic Ballet to audition for the company. So that's when I started training with Moslyn Larkin and Roman Jasinski.
Gosh. Was it unusual for this little Indian girl or any little Indian girl to be involved in this dance?
Absolutely. I was I guess the lone person out. Everybody else were basically rich white girls.
It's okay. I mean,
Because you had to be able to afford the classes, and I was on scholarship. I seemed to be able to make my way through my entire career on scholarship. When I was at OU, I was on a full scholarship, BIA scholarship, and I obtained my degree in teaching ballet from OU. And then I started dancing professionally with Ballet Oklahoma in Oklahoma City. And then I went to LA, and this was after I had auditioned for Dallas Ballet, Houston Ballet, LA Ballet, Tulsa Ballet, and Pittsburgh Ballet, and found out that I was 2 inches too short to become a major professional ballet dancer. So I went to LA and did movies and musicals and TV shows and commercials, and I danced with the Pasadena Ballet Company and a jazz company.
2 inches too short. Oh, jeez. Did your colleagues make a big thing of you being an Indian? Did that ever figure into any of your career there?
When I was at OU, Miguel Tarakoff, who was the director of the ballet company, routinely cast me as Spanish, Russian, all of the ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to dance solo dances in all the ethnic groups.
Oh, yeah, it's a good plan, Natasha. Of course, the other ballerinas that you mentioned there have become kind of an icon in the state. They've received notice from artists, paintings. I understand there's some statuary of those dancers.
Yes, there are statues in Tulsa that are life size.
Mm-hmm.
They're beautiful. I've been down there many times to kind of reminisce.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What was it? I guess the basic fan question is, what was it like being famous, so to speak, to working with some of these people, being on the stages, working with some of the most famous music in man's history, so to speak?
I don't believe at the time it registered, because we were so busy working so hard to put together the ballets that we did, trying to remember where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be, the ballets that you were performing. So in the process, while I was in that realm, it didn't dawn on me that these women that I was training with daily, that I danced with regularly, that I knew very, very well, were famous.
When did that dawn on you?
Probably not until just recently, when they started passing away, that I realized how famous they were. When I danced with Madame Chateau, I was sitting in the doorway watching her professional ballet class at OU, in awe of all of these dancers, not just her, but all of these dancers. And she turned around and looked at me and pointed her cane at me and said, "Little Indian girl, come here."
Oh,
And
my.
I was frozen. And she made me come up to the front, and she said, "I want you to stand here in the front with me. You and I are alike. We are different from all of these other females in this room. I will teach you how to look like them, because we traditionally are bent over with flat feet on the ground, and these women have longer legs, more extension, better feet, better arches, everything than we do." And she said, "You come take class with me, and I will teach you everything you need to know."
Oh my gosh. Another insider question here. What was it like then being in one of these productions? I mean, you even watch a football game and you know these players know the play, which way to go, where to stop and turn, or who to hit and push. Did you have this kind of mechanical sorts of things running through your mind during a production?
There's many facets that go on with performing a complete ballet. Number one, it's exhausting. It's terrifying that you're going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time or fall down. But it's also the most amazing, magical place you can be. You're creating art, and it's living art. It is constantly moving, and nothing is ever perfect, but you try and make it as perfect as you can, at the same time telling a story and creating characters, creating a beautiful scene while you're trying to stay on point, have your turnout correct, your shoulders down, your head up, your back straight. You have to kind of step beyond that and let all the technique continue, but at the same time forget about it so that you can create the art that you're creating.
I just have to ask, I mean, were there situations where you said, whoops, I went the wrong way, or
Oh,
I
absolutely.
slipped, excuse me for falling down?
There was a famous ballet dancer that came to when I was dancing with Tulsa Civic Ballet, and he was the guest artist in this ballet that we had performed many, many, many times. I'm sure he had performed it hundreds. And he was standing next to me pretending to talk because we were crowd people while other dancers were dancing, pretending to talk. And he leaned over and said, "Do you know when I come in?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Okay, when it's my time to come in, will you just put your hand on my shoulder and say, 'Go now'?"
You managed to pull that one off,
Uh-huh.
and nobody knew?
Nobody knew.
Oh, gosh. What did other Indian people think about you? Like, why are you doing this white man thing? Or were they supportive? Are they proud of you? What did you experience?
Well, one of the things that happened to me when I was getting my funding through the BIA, one of the people who talked to us about what we were going to do with our lives sat me down and said, "What do you want your major to be at OU?" And I said, "Ballet. I'm going to go get a Bachelor of Fine Arts in teaching ballet." And he said, "Little Indian girls don't dance. You need to become a nurse or a secretary or a teacher." And I said, "I'm going to be a ballet dancer, and not you or anybody else is going to tell me anything different."
Gosh, you don't need to follow those little predetermined paths.
No.
You can go your own way. And as you progressed, did you kind of know that you were moving through different levels and becoming more, well, I don't want to use the overworked word famous here, but more recognized for what you could do?
I kind of flown under the radar my entire life, so I never considered myself famous. I was just a working dancer, and I did everything that I could do. I was constantly working and training on becoming better. So I never considered myself excellent. I was just always trying to achieve the next level.
Oh, gosh. As you went through this experience, were there times when you just nailed it? I mean, when a performance was exactly what you wanted and came off well?
It's kind of funny because, yes, there are those moments, and then you'll usually glide gracefully off stage and trip over something in backstage. Well, dancers are some of the most humble people that you will ever meet because there is no perfection in what we do. There was always room for improvement.
As we see a few more like movies and things that are looking at the profession, like Black Swan and a couple of others, Do you feel like that brings you back? Do you think, oh, I remember that, or yeah, I was there, something like that?
It's kind of funny because one of the movies that I love features Baryshnikov, Mikhail Baryshnikov, and I actually danced with him in a studio in L.A., Stanley Holden Dance Center, and it was a surreal moment when he was in class with the rest of us, and then seeing him on screen in a movie doing the same thing. The moments that I've had throughout my dancing career were amazing and every day. So it was the ability to be able to be in that situation, to be able to experience all the things that I experienced, was fantastic. It was an amazing ability for me to actually be there and experience those things, and I knew that it was special.
I think we've got our second musical piece here now. Same question as before. Does this bring back memories or a smile to your face?
Absolutely. I know this dance. I've performed it many times.
The dance is?
It's the ballet of the little cygnets, if I'm hearing the piece correctly, and it's very fast, and the girls have their hands holding each other's hands, so you can't mess up because everybody's feet are going exactly the same way.
I think we've all probably seen that at one point, about four of them moving
and it's all the short dancers, just so you know, because they're the ones that can move fast. I was always the fast dancer. I would run out on stage, do a really, really fast solo, and run off.
Gosh. Yeah, I think we've got some interference from trucking next door. The discipline involved in this has got to be an incredible physical experience. I mean, you think of athletes out, football, they're knocking heads all day out in the hot sun, things like that, and then gymnasts coming in and working out, or boxers or wrestlers or something like that. Was that physical experience and training the same? Was it that hard? Did you get that sweaty, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think they've done studies between ballet dancers, advanced ballet dancers, and football players, and pound for pound, ballet dancers are much stronger than football players.
It is not a discussion that comes up very often. People think, the girls on stage and kind of bouncing around and doing these light, flighty little things, but my God, that looks like it's hard work.
It's one of the hardest things that you can possibly do.
Gosh. Now, being in a few sports, I noticed that, there's got to be some injuries from time to time. Did you go through some of that? Did you get hurt?
I did. Nothing was catastrophic. I've hurt my ankles, my feet, my arches, my knees, my back, my neck, my hips. So I've kind of run the gambit of all of the things that you can hurt and still continue to dance.
Did it ever happen during a performance?
Not from me, but one ballet I was in, the prima ballerina broke her toe right before the ballet began, and she danced the entire ballet on point with a broken toe.
Oh, my gosh.
And then went to the emergency room as soon as the curtain was down.
Oh, gosh, my gosh. Yeah. Was that a career-ending move, or?
No.
Gosh.
She let it heal and went back.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us danced in pain. I went to Florida to a ballet summer camp, and the lady there, Mrs. P., Ruth Petrinovich, she said, "If it hurts, smile. If it hurts really bad, smile bigger. I don't want to see a grimace until I see blood coming through the point shoes.
Let's hope that never happened to you.
I actually showed her the blood in my point shoe at the end of class.
Okay. Maybe you could clear up a bit of the mystery about the point shoe. People look at it, not familiar with it. You just think it's just this soft slipper that you wear, but it's not.
No, the toe where all of your toes go into is a hard box. And you'll see shows where dancers are like breaking them in the back of a door, pounding them with a hammer, sewing on yarn on the toe. But you have to make that fit your foot. And when you're dancing professionally, or like as I did in college, you went through a case of point shoes in a semester. We would get an entire case of point shoes, and most of those point shoes lasted about 2 weeks.
Just got worn out. The decision to take on a career like this has got to be kind of daunting. It's like there's no guarantee of anything. If something gets hurt, then you're done. If you don't get recognized, or somebody says maybe you're 2 inches too short, there's a lot of potential for discouragement there. So how did you deal with that?
I think I just always kept a very positive attitude. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and there was nothing that was going to make me stop until I was ready to retire. And retirement age is about 35.
Is that just because the body's worn out, or?
Your body just starts to revolt.
Oh, gosh. Now, the music for many ballets is well known to a lot of people who don't know a darn thing about ballet. Something like this, does it...
I know this variation.
Did you dance the variation?
I've danced this variation. I love this variation. And I can't listen to this without hearing the steps.
Mm-hmm.
I always hear the steps. I'm also the worst critic. People don't like to go to ballets with me.
Oh, my.
Because unless they're excellent dancers, I will sit there and say, point your toe, turn your leg out from your hip, put your shoulders down. What are you doing? Oh, my gosh. Why are your arms that way? Shoulders down, elbows up, soften your fingers. The entire ballet.
Sounds like myself when I'm trying to edit a piece or something like that. You just get so critical you can't stand it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't do that, or don't write. How did you write this? My God, you missed the point. You just buried your lead in the story, and you just can't pull away from it then.
There for a while at OU, I was an assistant to Miguel Tarakoff, and I sat, they call them ballet mistresses. You sit and you critique and help the dancers make their performances better.
And do they react well to it, or do they get a little upset?
Dancers are very humble. They will always take a suggestion.
So divas are not welcome then?
Not really. About the only one who was allowed to be a diva was Madame Chateau, and she never was.
Mm-hmm. Can you take a second here to name those 4 or 5 ballerinas for us?
Okay, Moslin Larkin, and she was married to Roman Jasinski, and their school was in Tulsa.
Osage?
No, I don't know, you'll have to check your...
Okay.
I'm not sure. She's not Osage. The only 2 that were Osage were the Tall Chiefs.
Right,
Maria and Marjorie Tall Chief. And the other one that I trained with was Yvonne Chateau, which in the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, she was the youngest ballet dancer at 14 to come into the company. And I believe it was Danilova who nicknamed her Ivanichix, which the entire company nicknamed her Chixie.
Oh, gosh. The mark they've left on the arts culture here in Oklahoma is amazing. We've seen the paintings, the sculpture. One of Oklahoma's cultural treasures, How important is that, do you think, for the people of Oklahoma to understand and appreciate?
Well, if you think about it, all of them came back and taught in some place. Maria Tall Chief was in Chicago. Marjorie Tall Chief was in Dallas. Madame Chateau was in Oklahoma City and Norman. And Moslin Larkin was in Tulsa. And out of all of their students, most of the ballet teachers that are around Oklahoma, especially now, are from them. They were trained by them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great legacy for the two that were in Oklahoma, is that their training is still going on through their students.
And the impression it leaves on non-native Oklahomans is, how do you feel? How important is that for them to say, hey, these were ended?
You know, I hear it everywhere I go. People are enthralled that these women came from Oklahoma, that they were native, and they made their world ballet. It's almost impossible to imagine that was achieved and that those ladies did that.
And, of course, the recognition ceremony at the Historical Center and the paintings that are now displayed with
Everywhere.
The legacy they've left is so important, but I don't know that a lot of our native people are aware of it. Would you agree with that, or is there something that we should be doing, you think?
I think there's truth in that statement. I think that they are probably more well known outside of the Native communities, but they are known. I think that teaching more about those women and what their legacy is would be a beautiful thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to see some program or some sort of effort to recruit Native girls into forming a troupe or something like that? I know that's an incredibly challenging task, but...
Actually, I think there is a company now in Osage country, the Tall Chiefs. I'm not really familiar with it, but I do know that they have a company and that they put on ballets.
Well, that would be a wonderful history to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you keep any connections with the with dance? Do you teach, coach, encourage, or is life a little more different?
When I came back to Oklahoma when I was 35, I continued to choreograph, teach, and dance. I danced in a liturgical ballet company. I choreographed for Broken Arrow Community Theater, Theater Tulsa, Tulsa Indian Actors Workshop. I have a thing for musicals, so I did a lot of musical theater. And then I retired completely at 48 and became a shaman healer. It was something that my ancestors had always told me that was my path when I finished with my love of dancing. But to keep myself in dancing, I dance with the Creek Fiddle Dancers here with Mvskoke Creek Nation, and I also shake shells at stomp dances.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, there's got to be some traditional aspect to what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Which grounds, by the way?
Tallahassee.
Okay, so you keep that connection.
And I also have a Cherokee grounds that I go to.
Ah, okay, well, that's forgivable. I guess finally, if you were to encourage a girl, someone who might be showing some interest in ballet, what would you say to them?
Ask for recommendations on a good teacher, and figure out what you want to do with it. If you're serious about it, it is a 24/7 endeavor. What you eat, how you live, sleep, being healthy, training as much as you can. I mean, I have a degree in teaching ballet, but I also learned jazz, modern, tap, acrobatics, flamenco. I learned everything that I could possibly learn. I also took voice lessons. I took voice and diction lessons. I took acting lessons. And I never stopped any of those the entire time I was dancing. So if you had a character piece in a ballet, you knew what you were doing because you had trained in it. So if you really want to be a ballet dancer, it's a lot of hard work, and it's not for the faint-hearted, but to find a good school and just start training.
Right. It's reminiscent of an Olympic athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work that hard.
Yeah.
And you start when you might be a mouse in the nutcracker. Were you a mouse in the nutcracker?
No, actually, I started too late. By the time I started, one of my first dances that I got to be in, I was an understudy with Tulsa Civic, and the ballet was being rehearsed. The principal ballet dancer got injured, so a soloist went up to principal, a corps de ballet member went up to soloist, and the understudies in the back. Moslyn Larkin said, "Who knows this dance?" I raised my hand, and she chastised her entire ballet company for not knowing this part, because I was the outsider. I was the little Indian girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had come in to be an understudy with her company, and she stood me in front of the entire company and said, "Do the step." And I did the step, and she said, "You have the part."
Oh, my gosh. All right, well, we have enjoyed this nice little chat and seeing you again outside of a nursery crib. And I want to thank you, Nancy Scott Fields, for coming in and sharing this. It's such a wonderful chance for us to kind of break out of our mold. So 2,000 Meadows, and we want to wish you well. And I'm sure we're going to cross trails again.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, Nancy Scott Fields talking about her career as a ballet dancer with some of the most famous artists in that profession, and particularly for cultural icons for Oklahoma. Okay, well, let's see, where are we here? We got a couple of minutes left. Throw in a couple of real fast announcements, perhaps. Yeah, biggest one, of course. The festival is back, 23rd through the 26th of June. Family fun at the Mvskoke Nation Festival, usual place, usual time. So unless something changes, that's where we are. And it'd be nice to have it back after a couple of years being COVID virus prevented. Okay, and the other important cultural aspect of this coming spring, of course, are the wild onion dinners, Tavambachi. Had some from Tulsa Indian Methodist Church, and it was wonderful. Okay, there are others coming up on the 25th. United Methodist Church in VAWA from 4 to 7. And on March 26th, Broken Arrow Indian Methodist Church from 11 to 3. On the 26th, Conchardi, yay, that's a good one. United Methodist Church in Omogi from 11 a.m. until 3. Also on the 26th, Claremore Christ United Methodist Church in Claremore. And no time is given for that one, but I can imagine it's going to be from 11 to 3. On April 2nd, Springfield United Methodist Church in Okemah from 11 to 3. Now that is a carry-out and an in-person dinner, so if you just can't wait to get home and eat it, you can have it right there. On the April 2nd, Norman First American in Norman from 11 to 3. And on April 30th, Angie Smith United Methodist Church in Oklahoma City. So we hope that you will be able to partake of that and enjoy a wonderful dinner of traditional wild onions. Okay, that does it for me. I guess we'll get out of here and see what we can cook up for the next program next week. So, Mado Mabo Hedgetscut, Gary Fife, Jahu Difkidos. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.